the first time that we've sat down together since the leak from the Supreme Court on the Roe v. Wade decision. And so Andrew explains it to us this week. That's what we're doing on To Be the Church. Welcome to the To Be the Church podcast, where we explore what it looks like to truly be the church together. The band is back together. I'm Tyler. This is Andrew. This is Ben. Behind the cameras today, we have Cody as normal. We have a new face, Tucker. So leave your comments on how he did running the cameras today. And in fact, our first question, I think, might actually come from Tucker.
Whoa.
Did you send in a question, Tucker, recently? Oh, you did. Okay, so this is from you. This is about our NGC 101 course, which is our membership class here at East Vancouver, campus of Northwest Gospel Church. It says this. Okay, so I'm going through the NGC 101 course online, and I have a very serious question. Your honest answer will help me determine my choice of membership. Did you, Tyler and Andrew, just switch your shirts between video sessions to make it look like it was filmed the next week, or they actually filmed on different days or weeks? I appreciate your time on this, as I do believe this is an extremely important truth to know.
That's big. Yeah,
that is big.
That's huge. Did we, Tyler? Can you verify?
No. In fact, if you watch those videos, you'll notice that we each get like a little bit smaller every time, because it was like the beginning of the COVID shutdown when we were recording that. So we were like both working really hard to like lose weight and be healthy and stuff. And so I think between the two of us, there might be like a 40 or 50 pound difference from session 1 to session 7.
Yeah.
But we definitely didn't do those multiple a day. Now these podcasts, we definitely do more than one a day. And sometimes we don't even care enough to change our shirts. But yes, so hopefully, Tucker, that helps in your choice of memberships here. We're not going to talk about that for 30 minutes though.
Okay.
So it has been a few weeks since we've recorded, and some of my favorite episodes of this podcast are where we say something that's going on maybe governmentally or like in a legal sense, and we like, oh, let's talk about that for a minute, and then just let you kind of go and explain it to us. Okay. And I've heard from listeners that found that really helpful as well, different aspects of elections or stuff like that. And so something happened, like a leak happened with an upcoming SCOTUS decision, Supreme Court of the United States.
That's what SCOTUS stands for, yes.
That's about my contribution to this conversation. But Andrew, tell us, what's been going on, what's happening, and what's going to happen, or what could happen, I guess, over the next handful of weeks.
Yeah, so that did happen, the leak. I was actually I was down in Southern California, I think, when that happened. It was... I think it was the week leading into Mother's Day. So Mother's Day was the 8th, and that was probably, that was May 1st or something probably. It was like the Monday night. So the Supreme Court has been working on a decision on what's called Dobbs. It's just abbreviated as like the Dobbs case. It's Dobbs versus Women's Health or something like that. It's a case out of Mississippi, and they took it on the docket. The Supreme Court decides every fall, what cases they're going to hear. Obviously, there's like hundreds of cases that could go to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court has to vote on the ones they want to hear. And so they set that, I think it's late summer or fall that happens, and then they'll take a certain number of cases. And even the cases they decide to take depends on the makeup of the court. And so when this Dobbs case was decided on with the new Supreme Court, we obviously had in the 4 years of Trump's administration, we had 3 Supreme Court justices that were appointed in a 4-year period, which is like unprecedented. In fact, I think if you go back in American history, I don't know if there's a president that in one single term appointed 3 at the same time. For context, Obama was president for 8 years, and he got 2. And that's pretty normal. Like if a guy's in there for 2 terms, that maybe he'll get 1 or 2. So anyway, with those 3 justices, Kavanaugh, Barrett, and Gorsuch, they decided to take this Dobbs case. And from the beginning, from last fall, 2021, when they decided to hear the Dobbs case, the thought was like, oh man, this could be a real change of direction with Roe v. Wade, which was decided in 1973. And Roe v. Wade basically, at that time, if you research back on it, at that time, a majority of the states, I think it's like 65% of the states at that time, had laws on the books preventing abortion or radically limiting it, if not making it completely illegal. And there were a few states that were starting to loosen restrictions on abortion. And the Roe v. Wade decision basically then applied, like the Obergefell decision just back here in 2015, where that kind of like gave the right to gay marriage to all citizens of the United States. The Roe v. Wade decision did the same thing in 1973. They determined, based upon the decision of the court at that time, to make abortion legal in all 50 states. So that, a lot of people say that kind of created the modern day culture war, because it was such a contentious issue. And then suddenly you had, 35, 38 states or whatever it was at that time that didn't allow abortion at all, or had very strict regulations on it, that it was like fully legal. So about 20 years later, I think it was 1991, 1992, there was a Supreme Court decision, Casey versus Planned Parenthood. And in that decision, that was kind of the first shot to overturn Roe. And what the court did is they came up with this really interesting, there's like a 3-part split with the vote. And there were a couple justices that wanted to overturn Roe. There were a couple that wanted to leave it alone completely. And then there was like 3 justices who came out with this opinion, I think written by Anthony Kennedy, the guy who had retired recently. And basically Casey shifted Roe a little bit, but basically made it a little even more difficult to kind of interpret what they wanted to do. So it was based on like trimesters and all these this question of viability of a fetus and those kind of things. So Casey, rather than overturning Roe, just kind of doubled down on the same type of deal. So Roe and Casey, that's the abbreviations you'll hear, are the 2 in the last 50 years major Supreme Court decisions that have had to do with abortion. So this leaked opinion, a lot of people said with Dobbs, okay, what's going to happen with Roe and what's going to happen with Casey? The regulations and the things that were put in place there, are the Supreme Court going to overturn them completely, which is what conservatives really wanted? Or is the Supreme Court going to just kind of do with the Dobbs case like they did with the Casey case, which is like, okay, it's still going to stay legal in all 50 states. And here we're going to, from the Supreme Court, we're going to like lay out some new restrictions or some new things about how abortion can work. It's interesting because Roe and Casey, if you study Supreme Court decisions and those kind of deals, or excuse me, you study kind of the legal theories and legal philosophies, there's not a lot of legal professors, left and right. I mean, this is true on the left, it's true on the right, that think Roe and Casey are good decisions. Like they're really bad legal decisions. And that's pretty much held. You can find stuff on Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the recently deceased, pretty far left judge, who was real critical of how Roe was decided and that Roe wasn't a good Supreme Court decision.
Why is that?
Just because it's if you look at it legally, like they basically read into the Constitution a right to abortion, which isn't there. And then Casey, what they did is they read into the Constitution kind of this right to privacy, or to like determine your own what you want to do based upon a right to privacy, which legally the quote unquote right to privacy isn't in the Constitution. And so the job of the Supreme Court is to determine whether the laws that are put on the books are constitutional or not. So they're supposed to weigh, like the Constitution dictates that branch of government is supposed to interpret the laws. And there's this phrase, legislating from the bench, that you'll hear, which is basically the Supreme Court or the judiciary doing what is actually the job of the legislature, right? And so that can happen on a state level, that can happen on a national level, and on a federal level. And so what Roe and Casey really were them legislating from the bench, them kind of interpreting from the Constitution something that then became sort of, quote unquote law in all over throughout the whole United States, right, federally. So anyway, it's always been criticized, even from legal professors on the right and left, that it wasn't a great decision. But then, like, what do you do, right? So the Dobbs decision, this leak that came in or that came through, is super unprecedented. There have been other kind of leaks. I was listening to this podcast recently, actually last night, I think, while I was mowing the lawn, and they were talking about, they were interviewing a dude that was talking about the fact that the Obamacare decision, which was like, I don't know, well, we're in 2022, maybe 10 years ago now, that the Supreme Court decided on. There was like a little short leak that was like it's going to be overturned at the time, kind of in Washington, D.C. legal circles, and then suddenly it wasn't overturned. That's obviously not as high profile as this leak was. This leak was not just like somebody from within the court saying, hey, I think this is the way they're going to decide, which is like any traditional historic leak, quote unquote, from the Supreme Court, which it hardly ever happens because that's an institution of our country and a branch of government that's actually pretty locked down, pretty tight in terms of the trust among the justices. No matter their ideological opinions or their philosophies of the Constitution, there's a lot of trust between them. I mean, if you look back to even two who have recently passed away, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was real far left, and Antonin Scalia, who was really far right, there's been books written about their friendship between those two justices, and Clarence Thomas and all the others. They've always had a real good working relationship. At least publicly, that's what it seems to be. And there's a lot of secrecy in that branch of government, specifically because of how it works. So this leak wasn't just like, hey, I think this is how they're going to decide. Somebody saying that to a reporter. This was a full-on opinion from Justice Alito that was written in February, and what happens is the two sides come in. And the Dobbs side and the I need to look up who Dobbs v. Jackson, right? That's the name of the Jackson Women's Health Organization. So Dobbs and the Jackson Women's Health Organization would be the two sides would give their case before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court asks all these questions, and then when the trial there is over, what happens is the justices then they go and they kind of do some initial kind of how are we going to vote on this, which way are we going to decide, and then somebody who's in the majority will write what's called the majority opinion, and that will get circulated around to the 9 justices or to the other 8 justices, and then they'll respond back to it, and they'll kind of they'll go, no, I don't think that's well written, or I want to push back here, or whatever else, and then there will be positions from the minority, the side that gets outvoted, that'll be there, and depending on the case, There'll be a number of opinions that are written from both the majority side and the minority side of the decision. So Alito's draft opinion, which has been confirmed that this was legit, there are several people in the press that were like, there's no way that this is real, right? Like this is too, like they leaked the entire opinion. So somebody from within the court who had access to that opinion, which is actually a very small group of people. I think each justice has, 4 clerks. I think each justice has 4 clerks, and so there's only 9 justices. So that's how small. There might be some admin help in there, that might have access to something. Like people have been like, was it like a security guy that saw something on a printer? Because it's like so unprecedented. But the entire opinion, which was like 80 to 90 pages long with footnotes and everything and notes, was given to a Politico reporter who then broke the story on a Monday night. I think it was May 1st or right around there. So that's just crazy unprecedented. And the opinion from Alito, who's a Bush appointee and is a real strong conservative on the court, eviscerates Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, completely overturning them. Like it is as strong of a repudiation of those two decisions as you can get. And it basically says these were wrongly decided. They need to be completely overturned. And what that would do was it would send the abortion issue back to the states the way it was before the 1973 decision. So, there's a lot of stuff out there you see in the media and the protests, and people are going, this would make abortion illegal, or this would do this, or this would do this. And there's a lot of politicians that are saying stuff that's completely untrue because they're trying to get their side to respond in a certain way. This would not make abortion illegal throughout the United States. This would send it back to all 50 individual states, and then those states would have to create laws from their legislatures based upon what their people want. So when you hear stuff like this is against democracy, this is actually, if those things got overturned, it would be the democracies of the various states that would determine who they want to elect to their legislatures and what laws they want to put on the books. So what would happen practically is there would be a dozen states that would probably full on outlaw abortion completely. Louisiana has already put that in place, that should the Roe be decided here in the next month, that'll be completely illegal. In fact, in Louisiana, it not only would be illegal, but there would be for providing an abortion, there would be like you'd get charged with murder basically in the state of Louisiana. So Mississippi, Alabama, those states would go that direction. States like ours, Washington State, Oregon, California, they're already using the term sanctuary states for abortion, meaning they would provide, not only that they would provide very, very, very loose laws on abortion, but they would actually, California has put some stuff on the books where they would fund abortions for people who want to come from out of state using taxpayer dollars in California to fly people in and provide abortion services for people. So the deep blue states would get, in fact, the laws in the deep blue states would probably grow more in favor of abortion, because there's a lot of laws throughout the states where it's like you can't, you've heard of partial birth abortion or late term abortion. These are like, in the third trimester. That's illegal in most, if not all, states. In states like California, New York, and others, deep blue states, maybe even Washington, those type of things would get more. What am I trying to say? Not just more liberal, but more lax in the sense of the laws will probably be, even more. And what they say in those states is more, quote unquote, access to health care or more access to abortion care or whatever else. And so yeah, that would happen, and it would be adjudicated in all 50 states. And that would be, a lot of people have said, like with the pro-life movement, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, that's not the end of it. That's actually the beginning of it, because now state to state, you'd have to be making arguments of like, okay, this is what we believe and this is why we want to do this. And you'd vote for those people, and it'd become a pretty big thing in that regard. So yeah, we don't know yet what's going to happen. You've seen a lot of protests, you've seen a lot of articles out there, but we have no idea what's going to happen. So the leaked draft opinion was from February. There's been a lot of leaks, just like minor leaks in the last week or two that have said like, and not even leaks like that leak. That leak was nuts, right? With the whole opinion being actually leaked, the actual draft of it. But there's been a lot of news that the 5 justices who were going to vote in the majority to overturn Roe v. Wade, that they have still sticking by their votes. So that's what I'm praying for personally, that would happen, because then it would really. I mean, and I think, not only as a Christian, that would be good for all the states to be able to decide, and for abortion to be illegal in a lot of states, but also just as an American citizen, that's constitutionally the way that these things should work. Like the states should be able to decide what they want to do based upon abortion. Blue states would get bluer, red states would get redder. This would be one of those things where people would be exiting red states to move to blue states, and vice versa, if that happened, because of they'd want to be where the laws reflect their values, right? So I'm trying to think of anything else. Oh, so the decision will be actually probably released in the next 3, 4, 5 weeks. Usually these Supreme Court decisions come out in mid to late June is when all those decisions from a given term come out. So yeah, I mean, unless there's any, like, what else are you guys thinking on that you've heard?
Thinking I could have got lunch during the last 25 minutes.
Thanks, Ben.
No, so this podcast is called To Be the Church, not to be a political conservative. Those could be the same thing or not. I don't know. We're not going to get into that.
They don't have to be the same thing.
But I think
I gave a pretty straight line. I wasn't saying conservative, right? Was I being? I was being pretty objective.
That's
right?
just how I'm prefacing my question.
Oh, okay, sure.
I'm just saying because
you're not charging me with anything.
Because we try to be, I guess, careful or wise with how we go about addressing political issues within the church, right? But when it comes to the issue of abortion, I feel like most evangelicals were very comfortable and bold with talking about it and speaking against it, which to me, I think that's because it's more than a political issue. It's a moral issue. It's a theological issue. It gets down to what we think human beings are as image bearers. But when we think about to be the church, and we just did a noon prayer that you led, where you kind of had that in what we're praying for, what do you think it looks like for the church to be the church in this sort of situation? Because I think it moves beyond just holding to a pro-life stance, which that is obvious. I think if you're a Christian, you should be pro-life. But how do we be the church? Like beyond prayer, which is really important. I don't know, what does that look like? Because I think there's a lot of people, including myself, that's like very strong in my convictions about this, but is there anything else I should be doing?
Yeah.
What can I do? What should I do? So you want to speak to that a little bit?
100%. Yeah. And I think like, even when you said pro-life, I hear those voices even from the left side that often are saying, well, pro-life means pro all of life, and those kind of things. Like, not just, you don't just want people to be born, you actually want, and we can address that in a bit if we still feel like addressing it. But
what I'm talking about, which is protecting the lives of the unborn.
Yeah,
specifically.
Yeah. And so I think with that, the church really has to, I think, engage in this space, and I think the church does in a lot of ways. I think that should abortion be well, first of all, I think we should. This comes down to how you vote, practically, right? And being informed on those issues, being informed on the specific positions you're voting for, and what impact those positions would have on this, right? So if you're voting for a state legislature, like a House of Representatives or the Senate of your specific state, or you're voting for a governor, or you're voting for a senator or House of Representatives member from representing your state, or you're voting for the president who appoints Supreme Court justices and federal judges, if you're voting for any of those positions, you should know where they stand on the issue of abortion. That's really, really vital. If you're voting for, like, dog catcher of your local thing, like, their opinion on abortion is probably not as important, honestly. Like, they just need to be able to catch dogs. Is that still a thing, dog catcher?
I don't know what that is.
That's always when you're talking about, like, voting for things. Dog catcher is like the lowest of the political positions. Dog catcher. You guys have never heard this. You're looking at me blankly.
That's a real political position?
I look it up, dude. Dog catchers everywhere. Yeah. Yeah. So my point is when you should be informed on how you vote in that regard.
Those who have an influence over these things,
yes, exactly,
are who you should care about. Yeah.
So I guess we could edit out the dog catcher thing, Cody. But maybe
especially if Roe gets overturned and then it does become a state issue.
Oh, yeah.
That means those votes not matter more, but they are very significant state to state.
And even right now, your local state could vote on terms of abortion, but your local state couldn't make it illegal. If Roe and Casey are overturned, they can, right? And so your state reps and your state senators, huge, and your governor too, because you could have a legislature that wanted to overturn it, and they could do a law to that effect. And if you have a governor that doesn't want it overturned, they just veto it, right? So that's one thing. I think the church needs to speak the truth on these things. I think that's really, really vital, that we as Christians need to speak the truth. You're seeing it played out now, and you can see it all over social media and these kind of things. And the back and forths and the different legislatures that are adjudicating these things in states, and the testimonies being given from different sides of the abortion issue, and that's, I think it's vital for us as Christians to speak the truth about these things. About a big part of the abortion debate in America is euphemisms, and there's a lot of euphemistic speaking there, about the whole thing, because if you really get down to it, it's a brutal deal. It's a brutal human rights issue, and so I think we need to speak the truth. Now, major areas we as Christians, those who get pregnant and right now might just get an abortion, if they're in a state where that's going to be illegal, I think about all the scriptures that talk about the widow and the orphan and the vulnerable and the sojourner and those things, and the things that we as Christians are called to do to reflect God's heart and to, it's a cliche, but to be his hands and feet in those spaces. So we should be engaging foster care programs, adoption agencies, crisis pregnancy centers. We at Northwest Gospel support one, Pathways Clinic in Washougal, and Options 360 in Vancouver. And we should be volunteering in those places, doing counseling, doing, taking in moms who need those services and helping them along in that regard. Giving money towards those kind of organizations, that we vet out and we go, man, they're doing this work in those spaces. And starting more organizations like that, it's super vital. So, but here's the thing. Nothing I'm saying right now is stuff Christians don't already do. I'm just saying those are those practical ways. I think prayer is a major, major practical way. I was saying in our noon prayer today about this, that we, we're going to be a state in Washington and then, Portland right over the border in our metro area, that those states right now are probably going to be putting California type laws on the books where they become sanctuary states for abortion, and they are flying in Amazon, which is, a major company in our state, has already said they're going to give, I think it was $4,000 to any employee who wants abortion services, and also including travel expenses if they live in a state that doesn't provide that. So we're going to have like pregnant young ladies who are flown into our local airport 15 minutes from our churches here, specifically so that they're, that they can get abortions. And there's going to be opportunities, I think, in communities like ours to be visible and to provide care for those, and to be the church toward those people in those spaces. And then I think another thing, and we talked about this a little bit too, is providing, because abortion is going to become such a bigger part of the narrative of culture, which again, that's hard to believe even from the last 50 years, but it's going to become a major issue on the front edge of politics and culture for the next number of years as these things are adjudicated, especially if Roe and Case are overturned. And so those who have had abortions, and think of this stat, there have been 64 million babies aborted in the United States since 1973, just since 1973. So that's 64 million babies, but that's also, and it's not separate mothers. One woman could have multiple abortions, obviously, but think of the millions upon millions, tens of millions of women alive today who have had abortions, and reaching out to those women and being declaring the gospel, repentance and forgiveness and redemption and what Christ has done for those who will feel that every time they hear about it, right, they'll feel that guilt, or they'll feel that condemnation, or they'll feel any of those kinds of things. To be able to be preaching the gospel and the forgiveness that's in Christ, and the reality that Christ not only forgives but makes us whole and redeems us, and that's really, really vital too. That note is sounded from the church, and that's another part of speaking the truth. So all of that stuff falls under speaking the truth, I think. Any other ideas that I haven't mentioned that we could do?
No, I mean, yeah, and I think it's good that you pointed out that these are things that Christians are doing.
Yeah,
because one of the cultural narratives is that, like people who are pro-life don't actually do any of this stuff, and so I think that's an important piece.
Yeah, yeah, and that was one that was gonna address of if you, in fact, I saw somebody make that make the counter argument today on Twitter where they said it's just lazy to make the argument Christians only care about babies being born, they don't care about literally do a Google search and find the crisis pregnancy centers and find the adoption things and the foster care and all of these deals, and see who gives the vast majority of dollars, starts all these places, works in them, the hours, money, agencies that are started from churches and Christians. And it's not exclusive, right? There's non-Christians that work in those spaces too, but it's Christians do all that stuff. And so it's a complete straw man, the idea that you only care about birth, you don't care about that. And it's really a misdirect, because the only argument, honestly, from the abortion side is a misdirection argument. They cannot, in the actual arena of ideas, without calling someone horrible or just insulting them or creating a straw man, their argument literally is let women take care of their bodies, or let women do what they want to do with their bodies, which means they want to kill the child inside of them. That's the argument, right? And except without the kill child inside of them thing. So it all has to be euphemistic. The argument, it's brutal, it's violent, it's gross, it's things you don't want to think about. And so and you're seeing this now, you see this all over social media and stuff. It's clear that those on the pro-life side have had to try to make their argument for the last 50 years, and those on the pro-abortion side have not. Because when you actually start seeing these things adjudicated in legislatures, it's happening right now. I'm seeing every day, I'm seeing state legislatures and different things where people are testifying and the two sides are going at it. And the pro-abortion side, they haven't had to make their argument because the Supreme Court just decided in Roe and then doubled down in Casey that like, no, you guys can do what you want. So I think we're going to see that it's going to get the rhetoric's going to get intense, and
I think at the root of it is a Romans 1 suppressing of the truth. I think they do know it's wrong, and I think, but in our flesh, apart from Christ, autonomy from God is what we will protect at all costs, right? We don't want to be under anyone else's authority, especially God's. And so I think, because I think when logically, rationally, there is no good argument for it. Even older arguments, like it's just a clump of cells scientifically, are being disproven. And so I do think it's one of the fruits or the evidence of that Romans 1, that when we don't acknowledge our Creator and instead we suppress the truth and live as our own God, these are the sorts of things that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And in Romans 1:2, that denial of nature idea is also there, because you think about like a lot of the narratives, like women, I've heard these things like women are going to be, this is forced pregnancy from the government, and stuff like that. And you're like, you don't just like get pregnant, like just by like thinking it, right? Like there's a actual biological thing that happens here, right? And so
and then they'll bring up the rape and incest, which is like less than 1% of all abortions. And
I saw this poll or these stats on that. 92% of abortions are just elective. Like, nah, I just want to get an abortion. It's an inconvenient thing, and 92%. And so that's what really the center of the argument is like, should that be allowed? Should that be legal or not? And so argument's going to continue, but yeah, that's the Supreme Court leak. That's the deal there. And I think it's going to be super interesting. One thing that happened last week was the Senate voted on to codify Roe, which would make it a federal law that, even if Roe v. Wade got overturned, that there would be a new federal law in the books that made abortion illegal through all 9 months of pregnancy. It was presented by the Democrats in the Senate, and it didn't get off the ground. Well, it got 49 votes from the Democrat side of the aisle. There's one Democrat, most powerful man in America right now. What's his name? The dude from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, who voted. He's a pro-life Democrat. He's the only one left, and he voted against it. So they're 51 against and 49 for. But it made some waves in Washington, because that was a major deal for all 49 Democrats in the federal Senate to go on record that like through all 9 months of pregnancy, because the vast majority of Americans are not cool with it in the third trimester. They want it to be, like Europe, where it's like most European countries, it's restricted after 15 weeks or first trimester. So we actually do have the loosest abortion laws in the developed world, on par with North Korea, if you call that the developed world, and China. So it's they're pretty extreme, obviously, in America, but.
Wow. Yep. So I'm sure we're going to talk about this more as the decisions are finalized and more information comes out. But if you have questions about this, or you would like to chime in, podcast@tobethechurch.com is the best way to do that. You can also do it in the comments on YouTube or via social media @tobethechurch. We'll be praying for this, and we encourage you to do the same. Have a great week.